We have Judges chapter 6 and verse 25. Gee, people think there isn't much spoken about this in the Bible, but we found a lot of evidence of the error of Israel's ways with respect to tree worship. And it goes on and says, "And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it." So here Gideon was instructed to cut down the grove and to throw down the altar of Baal. Who was Baal? Well, Baal was a Canaanite or Babylonian god that was worshipped by those who'd been in the land before Israel. Worshipped as a sun god. And Israel allowed this to happen. And here Gideon is being instructed, throw down the altar of Baal and cut down the grove. So we can tie this in with Baal worship, and we can tie it in with Tammuz worship, which we found earlier in Ezekiel. And what God wanted Gideon to do was actually burn up all the groves. So he says in verse 26, "And build an altar unto the Lord thy God upon the top of this rock in the ordered place, and take the second bullock and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the grove which thou shalt cut down." So God instructed Gideon, cut down all that stuff and burn it up. Well, in the morning, the men who built the altar to Baal in the grove, whoa, they were mad. Verse 28, "When the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built." And they asked who had done this thing. And it was told that it was Gideon, the son of Joash, in verse 29. And Joash was commanded to bring out his son that he may die, because he had cast down the altar of Baal, and because he cut down the groves that were by it. Well, Gideon basically challenged them. He said, "Would you plead for Baal?" He said, "If he's a god, let him plead for himself." Of course, Baal couldn't do anything about it, because Baal wasn't a live god. Ahab, the king of Israel, also served Baal. That's found in 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 31. And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and he took to wife Jezebel, which is a daughter of Baal, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped them. So here we see the king of Israel going to worship Baal, marrying a wife that was a daughter of those who worship Baal. And of course, what does Ahab do? He goes in verse 33, and Ahab made a grove. And Ahab did more to provoke the Lord. So what happened when Ahab made this grove of trees? He provoked the Lord to anger. The Lord didn't want any part of this tree worship. No part at all. We see Elijah coming to meet with Ahab in chapter 18 and verse 18. And he answered, this is Elijah speaking, "I have not troubled Israel, but thou, Ahab, and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and has followed Baal," or Balaam. "Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto the Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400 which eat at Jezebel's table. You see, the groves even had their own prophets. These trees had their own prophets. A multitude of 400 grove prophets. And Elijah put the prophets and the false gods of Baal up against God to see which one would answer. And you can read the whole chapter, chapter 18. The conclusion of it is that Elijah says in verse 40, "Take the prophets of Baal, not one of them escaped, and they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there." And all the prophets of the grove and the prophets of Baal were put to death. A very fitting end for these prophets, because these prophets were actually cannibals. You know what a cannibal is? You heard of cannibal? Cannibal means priest of Baal. Yeah, it means priest of Baal. Cannibal means priest of Baal. Because what these priests of Baal would do is they would have human sacrifices. And they would eat the flesh, because those who served at the altar would have to eat the flesh of those things that were sacrificed at the altar. So the priests of Baal, cannibals, would actually eat human flesh. And that's where the name cannibal comes from. Cannibal. Because cannibals eat human flesh. And if you look at cannibalism, it's a priestly ritual worshiping false gods and having human sacrifice, and where the priests of Baal would partake. And this spread throughout the world. It was in Rome, it was in Greece, it was in the Germanic people, Teutonics. Of course, the Aztecs and Incas are all famous for this. This form of false worship spread throughout the whole earth. And today we just know it as a word called cannibal. Somebody who eats human flesh. We pick up a little bit more in 2 Kings chapter 21. In verse 2. We see Manasseh, the king of Israel, doing the same stuff, getting into the same trouble. When Manasseh was 12 years old, he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, after the abominations of the heathen, who the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. And in verse 3, what did he do? He built up again the high places which Hezekiah's father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal, and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. A part of this tree worship was to worship all the host of heaven. The stars, the moon, the sun, the planets. And what better things to make ornaments to represent than little candles to represent little stars. Then a great big star to go on the top of the tree to represent the sun, or the sun god on top of that tree. To have round balls on the tree that look like planets. What better way to represent that? Worshipping the host of heaven in the grove than to decorate these trees with the heavenly host. Very, very ancient practice this was.